welcome back to the Aussie Football Passport, where the mood is a little bit low after the result yesterday. The Socceroos going down 2-0 to the host nation, USA, in Seattle. So we'll try and pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off to do this episode, but I am joined yet again by Adam and Scott from the Brisbane Football Review. How are you, Scott?
I'm good, Alex. Apart from the result yesterday, how are you?
Yeah, look, it was a rough day yesterday, fair to say, I think, and no doubt you share the same thoughts, Adam.
Yeah, I've sort of, Alex and Scott, and yeah, look, I was sort of questioning my choice of why I got up at 5 in the morning, but we do that for the Socceroos, even though just win, lose or draw. But look, it's a little disappointing, but I don't know if all hope is lost. I think we learned a few things, not only about Socceroos, but I think as well that I think the US team also might have proved a little bit better than what I think we gave them credit for.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in a lot of senses there, and we'll go into that in a little bit more depth. But before we do, Adam, I'll throw to you to plug the Brisbane Football Review.
Yep, you can find us on Facebook at The Raw Review or Brisbane Football Review, on Twix at BNE Football, Threads and Instagram, Brisbane Football Review, all lowercase. You can drop us an email, Brisbane Football Review at gmail.com, and you can find us on podcasting platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Adam. Really appreciate that. Go check out the Brisbane Football Review if you are in need of a fix of the NPL Queensland, or Brisbane Raw is your club side in the A-League, because Adam and Scott and Kurt do a wonderful job of covering that. Now, today's episode, so we're going to have a look at the other game from the group here, Paraguay versus Turkey. We're going to preview the Paraguay game, get the general thoughts on the World Cup from Adam and Scott and myself, but we will start with a review of the USA game. And look, we praised Tony Popovich for his starting 11 last week, even though it was very surprising. This week, though, I think it might have backfired a little bit as he turned to Nishan Veluplay and Matthew Leckie to replace the two goal scorers from the last game, Nestori Irankunda and Connor Metcalf. So a little bit interesting there, Scott. What did you think?
Yeah, oh, look, I said on the show last week leading into the USA game, I wouldn't be shocked if he changed that front third in terms of a pressing perspective, but I don't think any of us thought that Nishan Veluplay or Matthew Leckie were going to start a game in this World Cup and certainly not start this game here against the United States. And they just didn't have the impact that we were all hoping for in terms of what they could bring in terms of a creative aspect, because they never got the ball and never got the chance to show any of that. And the changes just didn't work, did they, in terms of having those two guys in there? They weren't able to link the play as well as players who came on in the second half. They weren't able to put the pressure on the United States in the way that we were able to in the first game, just across the board. It just didn't work, and it was probably the wrong move in hindsight to make those changes.
Yeah, definitely. The link, particularly Connor Metcalf, I think he's the real key to linking the midfield to the front third, and that's really what we lacked. The threat of Nestori and Kunda, of course, is crucial as well, and I think that's what worked so well against Turkey. You've got the dual threat, I should say, of Nestori and Kunda and Mo Toure with their pace in behind. Connor Metcalf sort of linking the midfield to those two, and I mean that's a pretty good recipe to play that counter-attacking football that Tony Popovich wants to play. So, speaking of Matthew Leckie, we saw an injury to Matthew Leckie. Adam, I mean, that potentially, we don't know the severity, do we, of that injury for a start, but is that the last we see of Matthew Leckie at a World Cup?
At a World Cup, I definitely think so. I think it's a hamstring injury. Even if the best case scenario, I guess a realistic best case scenario, which takes out to about July 10 or so, I don't think he recovers from that. So unfortunately, we see the last of him as far as in this World Cup, and I dare say I don't think he'll be going to the next one either in 2030. So it's sad in a way.
Mm.
Look, I've got to be honest. I had questions on his selection to begin with, because of not only because of his injuries, sort of being plagued. Now he has been battling injuries, various injuries for the last couple of years, especially for Melbourne City. And I was surprised we got picked. I understood that, but yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on your point there about the sad way that, Matthew Leckie goes out here because he's been incredible for the Socceroos. It took him a while to get going in front of goal, which, as an attacking player, that's what we expect from him. But once that floodgate opened, I mean, he wasn't prolific, but he scored one of the most important goals in Socceroos history at that last World Cup against Denmark, and I still jump up and cheer when I see that one because it's an absolute beauty. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you go and check that one out. It's an all-time favourite of the Socceroos. But moving on, I guess if we're to break the game down, would you say is pretty fair that we were outplayed, outthought, particularly in that first half? Tactically, I thought that the Alessandro Ciccardi and Karen Burgess were sort of pulled away from Harry Sutar, and it created those channels for the rotating attacking midfielders to play in. Scott, is that how you saw it?
That's a big part of what I saw. Yeah, the two things I saw the United States did really, really well, and that's one of my goal on that one first. It was their movement and their ability to move the Australians around in a way that Turkey never were able to do so. And it came down to their two midfielders, Tillman and McKinney, and the way their movement and the runs that they made, along with Dest on one side and Robinson on the other, they just moved Australia all around the field and opened them up. And that was something that we just did not have an answer to in that first half. In addition to their superior speed and just power and strength and everything they had in that physicality sense as well, all of those things combined made life really, really difficult from an Australian perspective. And you look at the way both sides played in their first games, everything the US did well against Paraguay, they replicated in that first half against us, didn't they? They moved Paraguay around and opened them up. They did that to us as well. Balogun up front was a handful against Paraguay. He was the same for us as well. The only thing that was different was that they had Pulisic in the first game, and he was sat on the sideline, basically having his feet up and having a nice day off in the end. So that was the only real change for the United States. Look, Pepe coming in and kind of being a dual number 9 alongside Balogun as well. That really did provide a different look as well. Maybe that different look, along with those things working for the US, really meant that it was a much more different opponent that Australia were potentially planning for. And Australia, everything we did well in the first game, none of it was there, was it? In terms of our our ability to hold our shape was not there in that first half. Our ability to have the composure when we got the ball wasn't there. Our press was nowhere near as strong. So everything we did well to get the result against Turkey, the Americans found a way to nullify and break down. And we said on the show in the preview that it would be a very different game if the US could score early. And they were able to do that, and then they were able to go on with it. And you have to say the game was pretty much over at halftime, and we can be pretty lucky it was only two, because if it was 3 or 4 at halftime, we would have been disappointed, but you couldn't really complain given the dominance that they had. They were very impressed with the US, you have to say.
Yeah, very much so, Scott. I can't disagree with anything that you brought up there, and
I mean, I
I
don't
think
want
that
to say they were impressive because they've annoyed us for 7 months with their confidence, but you have to say it was well founded.
yeah, it was definitely, and I think that was the point you wanted to touch on as well, Adam. That we potentially not underestimated, but maybe we not played down, but we just didn't expect this level of performance from the USA. Would you say?
I think the most satisfying thing, if you are Mauricio Pochettino, is that when you do something so well in the first game, to go and replicate it again second time, I thought was I think probably the biggest thing as well, especially against a different style of opponent and it's sort of different shape and formation. And Scott's right that basically what they did well against Paraguay, they did to us, and we really did not have any answers. In fact, we probably even by the changes that were made, probably also pretty much played into the hands of the Americans because simply as well by putting in Valupale and Lecky in, there wasn't that threat of the fast counterattack because they're not as quick as a Connor Metcalf, as a Nestor and Nakunda. Motore seems to be played, even though he did also start against Turkey. He is more of that hold up sort of style striker. So again, there was no visible threat. There was no press. You saw in the second half, and I know we'll get to it shortly, when the Socceroos actually started to press from the front. All of a sudden, things happened and they put the American defense and playing out under pressure. So it's again, I think it's a big L in the end, the tactical wise. And look, Tony Popovich, we praised him for his bold changes in game one. He's just going to take the L in game two and say, hey, I got it wrong. And we move on because the second half, as we talked about, was a lot better.
Before we do that, Alex, we should mention, I mean, we said Tony Popovich did get it wrong, but for 2 years, he's probably been building Nishan Vluplay up to play that role as a connector who can link play and run in behind for this very particular game, all these circumstances in this particular game. We saw it in the World Cup qualifying and it was relatively effective, but you have to say it just didn't work in this game. It was proven that, well, he was effective in that role in Asian World Cup qualifying and able to get the odd goal here and there and do that job. He was not able to do that against, say, physically stronger United States side. And that was a big part of the problem that Adam pointed out. Once we did get the ball back, and it was rare, between Lecky and Vluplay, the link just wasn't there, and that was a big problem as well.
Yeah, and I mean, for all the, I guess, positivity that Tony Popovich said, or positive things, I should say, that Tony Popovich said about Nishan Vluplay prior to the game, his ability to track back, you need to offer more than that. And I understand that he scored, 3 goals in 6 caps in, I think 2 of those goals went in Asian Cup qualification campaign and 1 came in one of the friendlies. But on the world stage, it's a different level, and we saw that he was very much exposed. And speaking of exposing and probably playing into the mindset, the change, well, I mean, Valuplay and Lecky, I definitely think played into US's hands really, because they've got a 38-year-old centre back who's playing in the MLS, who is on the decline, and who was found out in the game against Germany, I believe, where the the Germans drove straight at him and got past him and tailor-made for Nesri Irankunda from the first whistle of that game. The flip side is, did Tony Popovich not play him because of the hot-headedness that we know that Nestori has? Potentially that was his thinking, but I just think surely that's where you should have went.
Even a Mobile, Alex, with his speed compared to that, it's someone with some pace
Yeah.
to run at the two centre backs. 'Cause that was the weakness. I completely agree. They needed more speed, and Moture worked hard in that first half, but had no service. And I do wonder if he's genuinely carrying an injury because he was nowhere near as sharp as he was in the first game either.
Yeah, and he came off at halftime as well, which, probably adds a little bit of fuel to that fire, even though Jackson Irvine has come out with his famous quote saying that he's not a doctor, mate, to our good friend Vince Rigari. However, yeah, I mean, there's a genuine concern there, perhaps, and, even leading into the first game, there was all the sort of talk around Mo Toure. However, we digress, and, I mean, for all US's dominance, the goals that they actually got, if you break them down at an individual level, I thought they were a little bit scrappy. I mean, I'm being a little bit harsh there because, full credit to the US, they were very dominant in that first half, and they would have got goals other ways if they didn't get the 2 goals. And the other point that I wanted to make was around Patrick Beach. We praised him in the first game for his saves. He did well, and this is probably being overly critical here. So, I'll put my hand up. But Lydia Williams made a point at halftime around the second goal in particular, where he sort of went for the ball, made the save, but it opened up for the US and they poked it home. So, Adam, I don't know if you share my thoughts, if I'm potentially being a bit harsh, but do you think, it's obviously a hypothetical, but someone with Matt Ryan's experience in that situation, could he have done a little bit better and maybe it's only 1-0?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one because I do hear the comments that Lydia Williams did make in the halftime show. She's not wrong. She's someone that is that has. And I know the women's game is a little bit different, but still, you respect the opinion of a world class goalkeeper. Look, I would look at it as a critique more than anything else. That I think that the young lad will learn from that, and when he looks back, yes, he probably could have done better, maybe advanced out even more. In the second goal, there certainly was confusion as well, whether Balogun was offside, was he interfering in offside position? We all thought for a moment there that Alex Freeman was also offside, but it got proven otherwise that he wasn't. So there is a bit of that. On the first goal, again, does he advance outward to the near post and try and close that off, or or was that unpreventable? That the ball that came through was unstoppable, and in the end, it was Cameron Burgess. The unlucky one who was getting touched because Balogun was going to probably tap home there.
Yeah.
So, look, again, you're not wrong in sort of saying that yes, he could have done better, and I think as I said, I think it'd be more of a critique that he could probably look to do, but I certainly wouldn't say use a portion of the word blame for that. At the end of the day, it broke down a long time before, and I hope I'm not stealing Scott's thunder because spoke about this yesterday. But what is lost in the second goal is not actually the incident with the header and all that, but it was actually the lead up to the play, the set piece routine they had that sort of started that, and the fact that the Socceroos weren't alert to that is probably what contributed in the first place.
Yeah, that's so true, and I think I'll let Scott, jump in
Mm.
there 'cause this is his point really, isn't it?
Well, it is actually. I shouldn't have mentioned it to Adam yesterday because he is good at stealing a lot of the points I did make. But it was a really well worked
Mm.
set piece routine actually from the United
Mm.
States, wasn't it? In the way that they were able to create something different from a set piece as opposed to just the cross in. That was a different way of doing things that did catch out the Australians. I don't think they saw that coming as well. And Freeman certainly was in the right place to finish that off. And you can make your own mind up at home if Balogun was impeding Patrick Beach or not. I think it's a bit like the South Korea goal the day before, where Kim also came out looking for the ball and wasn't strong enough to be able to clear it. To your point, Alex, and then they had a tap in there for Mexico. So I think it was maybe a case we could have been a little bit stronger, but Patrick Beach has had two really good games for Australia. I don't think we should be too critical of him, and I'm not critical of Burgess either for the own goal. I know he's got a record of having them in the championship, but these things can happen.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, just picking up on Cameron Burgess before I go back to Patrick Beach, and maybe it's my, very limited knowledge as a junior defender, but it shows that Cameron Burgess is at least picking up the right positions. Obviously, the body technique and things like that, you could if you're being overly critical like I was with Patrick Beach, maybe you can say something there, but, I mean, Cameron Burgess could not do anything there with that own goal, let's be honest. Um, as you said, Adam, Balogun was right there
Mm.
next to him, ready to tap in. So I don't think that, yeah, we can be overly critical of Cameron Burgess with that one. As for Patrick Beach, yeah, I think you nailed it there, Adam. It's a critique more than a criticism
Mm.
of Patrick Beach. He's a wonderful young goalkeeper, and you do have to have these tough
Yep,
experiences like this to learn, and this is only going to make him better. I mean, this is
exactly.
a guy that um, I listened to Thomas Sorensen talk on a podcast earlier last week, saying that he'd recommended him to a few Danish sides. So, I mean, this is clearly a guy that's going places, and I think
Yeah.
after this World Cup, there'll be a number of European clubs knocking on the door of Melbourne City to ask for him to join them. But before we leave, I guess this game, we should probably talk about the second half and the much better uh, football that we played, particularly the substitutions, which again, I think the Toure being replaced by Aaron Kunda is a bit puzzling, but Mo Toure, probably to your point, Scott, maybe is carrying a bit of a knock and couldn't get through the 90. We also have to remember that this is being played at midday in Seattle, so the temperature would have been quite high, I'd imagine, and actually the hydration breaks were sensible for this game compared to others. Um, so, do you think, and when Metcalf came on for Play, you could see the connection there, couldn't you, Adam? And
Mm.
a much more connected performance, perhaps from front to back.
I think so. I think immediately when you had the speed of Iran Kunda and sort of, I guess, the linkage and what from Connor Metcalf, you could tell immediately that they were starting to put pressure back on the US. That the back three, back five, back four, whatever you want, however you want to sort of describe what the US were playing. I think it was probably a back four. They were all of a sudden under pressure, and you could tell. And Matt Freese, even though they were starting to back pass to Matt Freese, he was starting to rush his passes, and that's where things happen. And the Socceroos were starting to get turnovers in the US's half. That was just basically simply having a player that was committed and willing to actually go down and chase down balls. which was not happening in the first half. I do think a lot of tactics were in the first half, which I think also is very, very annoying in a way, was just to try and settle, just keep them in their place, and then second half to push forward. I just don't think you can do that at this level. Not against world-class teams that are obviously themselves going out there. And the US as well, they've shown now in 2 games that Pochettino's way is you go out hard, put the game out of reach, and then manage it inside the last 30. And look, you could argue if you're a one-eyed American and say, oh, they'll 2-0 front, they have the game under control,
Mm.
that they were probably throttling down a little bit. But at least the Socceroos made a game of it. And if they hadn't gotten a goal, then you could really say, "Wow, it was a chance." But look, I think that the second half, I think in isolation for the Socceroos was a lot better. You saw a lot more, and I think what it comes down to is uh, Conor Metcalf has to start. I think Aaron Kunda or someone of speed as well. So, like I said, Scott mentioned Owen Mobile as well. He may need to. He also needs to probably start just to keep that pressure on because again, I don't think this is too many times now in the Popovich regime that the team has started so slowly to a point where they're in neutral and they're trying to win games in 45 minutes rather than 90. And it's just, again, you can get away with that against the minnows of Asia. And no one will question the fact that Tony Popovich knows Asian football, and that's why he had the relative success. But against better nations or higher ranked nations, you just can't do that.
I mean, even against some of those minnow nations that park the bus for to use the parlance of modern football, uh, you can't do it. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but Wayne Rooney actually made a point. I can't believe I'm doing this. I really can't. I can't stand Wayne Rooney.
I always
Anyway,
knew he was a smart man.
yeah, I didn't think so, but he said you got to play your best players from the start,
Yeah.
and he's right. And that sort of leads me to my next point because Christian Volpato comes on, and oh my lord, we have a player, don't we, lads? I mean, this guy, I don't, obviously we didn't score, so we have to take that, but the quality on the ball, the set piece quality of the delivery. Speaking of another guy that's got to start, I think you got to find a way to start him, don't you, Scott?
We'll come on to who's just started against Paraguay in a moment. To Adam's point, I said that Mobile might have been a better option to start against US than Lecky. I didn't want to start him against Paraguay. I think the second half, there's two things going to be true here, Alex. The first is, yes, the US did really throttle down their intensity, dropped off significantly, and they did just manage the game out. But if that offends the Australian team, go out there and score a goal and make them pick it up again. We weren't quite able to do that, and we did look better in the second half. And the 3 changes made at halftime helped with that, as did the introduction of Volpato. And we were all really excited to see what he could do in a green and gold shirt after so long waiting to see what he was going to do. And his first impact off the bench in the World Cup, he did look very, very handy. And you've got to remember, he's only been in camp with these players for 2 weeks. He's
Yeah.
still building those combinations and understanding the way that Tony Popovich wants the team to play, the movement of players in the front third and how he fits into that. So to go out there in the first half, in his first appearance, and just be able to make things happen in terms of be able to at least create half openings and opportunities in the front third, which unfortunately we didn't take. That was really encouraging. I also like his fearlessness on the ball as well. When he got the ball, he showed no hesitation in what he wanted to do. He wanted to take players on and get the ball into the box. And I like the fact he had that instinct of, no, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go and do it. And then the US can deal with it. I thought he made a real impact off the bench. That was encouraging. It is worth keeping in mind those positives in the second half. They were there, and we did play a lot better. We looked a lot more in the game than we did in the first half. But in truth, the game was over in the first half. So you do have to remember both those things are true.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Series of points here, Scott. We've got to build on the second half, so to speak, and use the lessons from the first half. As also you mentioned, Adam, around the slow starts under Tony Popovich, he really needs to rectify that. We saw that even in the friendlies, before the tournament. So it's a trait of the Tony Popovich Socceroos, unfortunately, that he really needs to find how to solve in the next, what have we got, 5 days before the game against Paraguay. Before we preview
Oh,
Australia
sorry, I was
versus
just going to
Paraguay.
say.
Oh, sorry, yeah, go. Go for
Sorry,
it,
Alex. I was just going to say that point as well about that. Is that I think sometimes Tony Popovich, I think he's guilty of trying to outthink the opposing coach
Mm.
without thinking that. And look, Wayne Rooney is right, and agreement is that agree with him is that you've just got to start your best 11 and trust your best 11 and make the adjustments inside the game itself. But because the problem is that trying to play as horses for courses in tournament football, it's different in league football. I get that. I'm a big proponent of that. But in tournament football, you need to trust your best 11 players can be adaptable to any situation, and then you go from there. And I think that's the problem, that the bit of naivety from Tony Popovich. Now, I think he might have learned the lesson at this World Cup, especially facing a coach like Mauricio Pochettino, is that you just cannot go and decide and play and sort of make changes. That the classic example, I think I'm almost thinking that Scott might bring this up, is 2006, that where Gus Hiddink tried to get a little bit cute with his selections around the goalkeeper, and that nearly backfired on us as well. So I just think at this level, when you're playing top nations, you've got to play your best 11 and you adapt to the situation as it presents itself. You don't try and make wholesale changes to adapt unless the situation's under control.
Almost on my pointing out, I'm not quite. I was going to go back to 2006, also 2005. Gus Hiddink was also one to bring players off of the bench in terms of having players up his sleeve in that case. I wonder if Tony Popovich kind of looked at the way Gus Hiddink did things, having Harry Kuehl on the bench against Uruguay in the second leg. Of course, he was the player who made way for Kuehl in that game. So, and then you think about the game against Japan, where he brought Tim Cahill off of the bench as well. So I do wonder if, in some ways, Tony Popovich is thinking back to that and taking the mindset of the finishing 11 is more important than the starting 11. But that
Yeah.
can be true, but you still got to get to the point where you can introduce those players where you're still in the game. When you're 2-0 down, it's a very different situation. So I do think he just maybe slightly overthought that in the US game.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something, yeah. So let's see if he changes it for Paraguay. You could even, just off the examples you both gave, you could even go back to 2010, the opening game against
Oh,
Germany
yes.
with Pim
Oh, we're not
Verbeek's
going back to
wonder
that.
selection of Richard Garcia up front. But yeah, let's not, before Scott and Adam and I all have to relive that nightmare, along with you listening to this. Uh, so quickly, Paraguay, Turkey. Did either of you catch that game? Because I mean, that was a real scrap, I thought, from watching it.
What the second half of it, we were over at Heath Park watching the NPL doubleheader. I was watching the second half on the laptop screen, and it looked a lot like the Australia game versus Turkey. They had all of the ball and had no idea what to do with it. They kept trying the same thing, thinking it didn't work the first 999 times. Of course, the thousandth will be the time it comes off, and it didn't. And look, Paraguay all scored almost the same way as Australia did. So I think there's lessons there that Turkey need to take away, that they are just, you can't keep playing the same way. I thought Paraguay did okay. The second half looked like prime South American time wasting, extraordinary tactics. So I'd watch that if I was Australia. I wouldn't want to be got 1-0 down against this team because they're going to be hard to call black. But no Almiron, I think that's going to be quite a big loss. And I've completely forgot that rule was in effect until I saw the VAR thing happen. I did gone straight away, so I forgot that rule was in effect. But I didn't think it was going to catch anyone out. But there you go.
Yeah, so and that's why it's been brought in. Obviously, there was that high profile incident in the last season of the Champions League. Gianni Prestiani, I think, for Benfica covering his mouth and saying something to Vinny Jr., and hence why FIFA brought it in. And I'm not opposed to it. And yes, you'd think that the players would have learnt or would have known or been cognizant of that rule, but obviously the heat of the moment gets to you, and Miguel Almiron becomes the first victim of that. Adam, did you have any thoughts, or do you want to just jump straight into previewing Australia versus Paraguay?
I think Scott covered it. I think at the end of the day, it was wise games that existed, and especially when two teams had a lot on the line, and Turkey go home. Paraguay live to fight another day as far as the group goes.
Yes, and to Scott's point, let's get into the Socceroos versus Paraguay preview. But Miguel Almiron, that's going to be a massive loss for Paraguay. One of their most creative players, their most capped players, their biggest threat in attack, potentially, alongside Julian Enciso and Diego Gomez, of course. It's a big loss, and Adam, do you think that will change the way that they well, we know how they're gonna defend is gonna be a solid, compact performance, not too dissimilar to what we do, but the way they attack, do you think Miguel Almiron being absent changes the way that they attack?
Oh, absolutely. Almiron's their link man. We know how threatening and CISO is, how much he's relied on. And I think that's a simple game plan for the Socceroos. You take away the supply path and you put pressure on whoever the player that comes in to replace Almiron, and I think that's the key to victory for the Socceroos. I think you cut supply line off, and then you go for broke, and and basically it's there. You win the midfield, you're going to win the game. So I think it's simple. It sounds simplistic, but Socceroos still have to do it. I think they've got the cattle. I actually think perhaps thinking of maybe even going a third midfielder, a third sort of midfield. So even the possibility of Paul Okonengsler, Aidan O'Neill, and Jackson Irvine somehow maybe discard one of the three centre backs for it. Just to really box in that midfield of Paraguay and really make it work for them. Maybe then go to the back five once the game is under control. But I think that moment might be at least for Paraguay might be a very, very costly one in that fracas yesterday against Turkey.
Yeah, definitely, and I think, uh, probably to add to that point, and I'll get your thoughts on this, Scott, the pressure now really comes down to Diego Gomez and Julian Enciso. So they're the two main creative outlets. They changed strikers in between. Antonio Sanabria started the first game. I can't recall who the striker was that came in to replace him in yesterday's game. But I guess there's not a nailed on starter up front, and then you've got Enciso and Gomez in behind who are going to be the creative outlets. So does Tony Popovich make those midfield changes that Adam talks about? Or, I mean, I think Connor Metcalf's got to start, and I think that's a point. Does it mean that he goes into sort of a number 10 role perhaps, or a floating role behind two strikers in front of him, and O'Neill and Ocon Engsler are behind him perhaps? What are your thoughts, Scott?
First, it was Isidro Peter, the guy who came on up
Thank
front
you very much.
for them. I do agree that Almiron's the player they could not afford to lose their link man. He was a huge loss for them, and they played for the 1-0 after he went off. And I suspect they will be quietly happy with taking in a 0-0 draw if they could get it in this game. From an Australian perspective, I agree with what you're both saying about taking out a centre back and pushing an extra body into the midfield. I just don't think he's going to do that. I
No,
think
he's
he's
probably
too
not.
far down the path now if he
Yeah.
wants this structure and system. He's built it from day one. I think it's something he really does believe in. It suits the way the Australian players we have at the moment. So I think we are going to stick with the shape. The interesting thing will be, does he stick with the 11 who started the second half? Because that actually worked quite well with Guerrier in the back three in place of Burgess. That worked a lot better, although I would still like to see Lucas Harrington come in place of Gary, but we can argue about that if you like. I wonder if he'll freshen up the midfield because those two guys have played twice 90 minutes and maybe they might need a different body in there. But the front third's the one everyone's talking about. I think it's going to be three up front, and it's a bit like 2006 where you had to try and fit Bresciano, Cahill, Kuhl, and Viduka into the same team. And Gus Hiddink did it twice. He did it off the bench against Uruguay after half an hour in the second leg, and he did it for 20 minutes off the bench against Croatia, both times chasing goals to get back into the game. So I don't think you can fit Volpato, Metcalf, Toure, and Irankunda into the same 11. Not the way he plays. There's no way you can fit those
Mhm.
four in, and it's one of them has to sit out. And I find it really interesting. I think that it's a case of it's Irankunda or Volpato because Metcalf has to play. You saw his link-up play when he came on in the US game. He makes such a huge difference, and I feel like they really do need that link-up player against a really strong South American side who will be really good on the press. We can guarantee they will take a lot of what the US did and try and enforce that themselves. I think they need Mo Toure's ability as a pure number 9 to run in behind. So it's a case of, do you go with the same three that worked against Turkey, or do you bring Volpato in for potentially Iran Kunda? That to me is the choice. I don't think you can fit all four of them in. So it's a lovely thought to see how you would do it. And maybe a different system you could, but the way Tony Popovich has gone down the path for the last 3 years, you can't fit all four of those guys in the three positions. So I'll be intrigued to see who does miss out.
I guess the only alternative would be if you were to play Metcalf deeper as one of the two sort of central midfield players in that system. But his left-footedness means that means Ocon Engsler comes out, and the way that he's played, I see it's very difficult. But to your point, Scott, maybe he wants to freshen up that midfield, and you could see a partnership of Metcalf and Irvine,
It's the
like at
only
St.
way it would
Pauli.
work, but it's very
Mm.
light on in terms of defensive strength. So you are
Yeah.
opening yourself up. So you can do it. It'd be
Mm.
super attacking, and I'd love to see it, but I just don't think it's going to happen. It
No.
doesn't feel like a Tony Popovich move, does it?
No, no, it feels much more an Ange Postecoglou, type of move rather than a Tony Popovich move, to be quite honest. I guess maybe, to your point, Scott, around the back three, Harrington coming in, obviously, I've got uh, two very biased people here in terms of Lucas Harrington to start, but let's make the case for Lucas Harrington. I'll start with you, Adam. What do you think? Do you think he just comes straight in for Cameron Burgess, and why should he?
Oh, well, I think definitely Kevin Burgess, and not again, not because anything he's done wrong. I just think it's a mobility issue that again you've got the one sheet anchor in Harry Sutar. Chikati is very mobile. You need mobility on the other side. Look, I think Lucas Harrington. I think familiarity as far as a lot of these sort of players do play in that play in the MLS as well as sort of if Colorado get to where they want and he's still there, there's this conjecture about that. But that potentially, down the road, in a CONCACAF Champions League, look, it's probably more hometown advantage. But I think, to be honest, I don't think it's Lucas's time just yet. Seeing what's going on, I think that the hand that Toe Pop has shown is that if you're going to make changes to that back three of Burgess, Sutar, and Kuchati, I think he prefers Jason Guerrier, and I seem to lean towards that as well. I think that Guerrier probably fits that profile better than Lucas Harrington, as much as I'd love to see him play.
I think Adam misunderstood the assignment, Alex. It was to make the case for, for Lucas Harrington. Oh, we'll make the case for him.
Unfortunately, I can't.
I think Ali Shakate is better on the right hand side of the back three. So I think that automatically means that you're looking for somebody on that left hand side. And again, it's nothing against Cam Burgess. It's just that the United States showed that you can drag him out of position and really capitalize upon that. And you have to imagine that Paraguay will try and do the exact same thing. And Tony Popovich is a big believer in Lucas Harrington. Every single game he has played, he has looked incredibly comfortable in that side. And you have to think he's been picked for a reason over someone like a Kai Rolls. He's not just there because he's an 18-year-old defender playing in the MLS. He's there because Tony Popovich believes he can do a job in this team more than what Kai Rolls can do. And you have to imagine it could be in this game as that left side centre back. So I think if there's going to be a change, that would be the one I would go with.
Okay, if you insist, I've got to make a case for. I
I'm
also
just following the host rules. You're just
no,
going against it.
I will.
Please don't fight, gentlemen.
I will add an addendum to that. And what I do believe in Lucas Harrington as well, what I think he brings, I think he's a very, very good passer. I think that his passing range is a lot better than I believe than Harry Sutar. Definitely better than Cameron Burgess, no disrespect to either of them. So again, if they're trying to play quicker ball out and trying to hit Paraguay on the counter, especially if they've got them boxed in. I think Lucas Harrington's probably the better sort of range of passing to get that quick mobility. And again, that then brings in the front three. So that's also probably if you have one advantage. How he compares to Jason Guerrier in that regard? Look, I still think that Harrington probably naturally has got a better pass on him.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I think the other point that I'd like to add here is the ability that Lucas Harrington has in stepping into midfield to potentially create that third midfielder when we have the ball. That could be a really crucial element to the game plan of Tony Popovich. Uh, you know, Chikati and Sutar sort of slide across, and Harrington steps into that midfield to create that third midfielder. It could be a great way for Australia to attack and, as you said, Adam, box out that Paraguayan midfield. So that's probably the case for Lucas Harrington. In terms of other changes, would you would you go with, I mean, Cameron Devlin, we've not seen anywhere near enough of him, in my biased opinion, under Tony Popovich. Is he someone you throw straight into the centre of midfield, or are we gonna go Jackson Irvine potentially over Aidan O'Neill to pair up with Ocon Engsler?
I don't think we're going to see Cam Devlin playing in this tournament. Unfortunately for you, Alex, I think if
Yeah.
there's going to be a midfielder coming in, it will be the experience of Jackson Irvine. I actually don't think there'll be too many changes into the team. I think there'll be one at the back in terms of the starting lineup. It would be probably, for me, it'd be Harrington in for Burgess, and then in the front third, there will actually be three changes because I'd take out both Lecky and Valupale, and then I'd bring in Metcalf and Aaron Kunda. So that'd be the three changes I'd make to the team that started against the US. I'd like to change the two in the middle of midfield, but they played so well in there, and clearly they trust Paul Ocon-Engsler quite a lot to do that job, and he's done pretty well in the first two games. And I don't know if there's anybody else who could come in and do that job. I think Jackson Irvin's a different sort of player who just gets forward and gets in the penalty area. So I think I'd be bringing in Harrington at the back for Burgess, and I'd be changing the two wingers. That's the changes I'd make.
What about for you, Adam? Would you do anything differently to Scott?
No, I tend to agree with him. So I think they're the three changes that need to be made. The only sort of sidebar I'd say is that if there's any game that you want to see a different player, say like a Cam Devlin or something like that, given the relative stakes in this game, while they are high, they're not the end of the road as long as you don't get absolutely smashed. So that might be it. But again, then it just make a total contradiction what we were saying before about playing his best 11 every game. And at the moment, I think that those players are probably the best 11 that Australia have got.
There's two other quick things, Alex. We haven't mentioned Adrian Rustic yet, and you have to think he's been taken for a particular purpose as well. So who knows if this game is in mind for that. The other point Adam makes is a really good one about the stakes of this game. Yes, it's important. It's the final group stage game, and the US have wrapped up top spot in Group D. Congratulations to them and all the rest of it. But there is a bit on the line here, but there's a pretty good chance both of these two sides, unless there's a heavy defeat for either of them, will get through as at worst one of the best third place sides. So well, it is all to play for in terms of that second spot in Group D. I think there is a good chance both will get through anyway. So while it is a notionally high stakes game, there is that fallback for both. And I do wonder how both sides will look at this game going ahead with that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point that you raised, Scott. And if we look at both sides, Socceroos and Paraguay, we've watched 2 games each from them, both. It's fair to say that the coaches are on the conservative side with the way that they play. Everything in me says that it's going to be a 0 or draw. Everything. I don't know if you disagree with that, gentlemen. I hate making predictions, and
You'd take it right now, though, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%, because we would get ahead as the second place team if my understanding is correct. So, I mean, yeah, and Paraguay wouldn't be disappointed with getting through. I mean, they did a similar sort of thing in the 2010 World Cup from memory, and backed it up again in the 2011 Copa America, where they were just a defensively solid side that ground teams down and wore them down, took them to penalties or nicked the late goal to progress with 1-0 victories. So that's really, I don't think this team's very much different from that previous Paraguay generation that we saw.
Especially with the forced change now, no, Almiron as well. I think that they may go back into history and do that. Yeah, look, you're right. I do think Paraguay will try and at some point try and win the game, but I think there'll come a point to say, you know what, preservation might be the best. As we're starting to see with this, a lot of these other groups, it looks like that 4 points will be more than enough to finish in those top 8 third place guys. There's going to be some points that potentially that 2 points might and a good enough goal difference might get you there. So I think certainly, yeah, going out or like must win. I don't think is entered into this conversation as far as this game.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't think there's going to be. Yeah, it's hard to see it being a score draw of more than 2 goals. Really, it's everything
I
can
think
be
that's
felt.
generous. I think 1-0 is probably the most likely score, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a 0 or a 1-0.
yeah.
It's hard to see it playing out any other way than that.
The
But
the under 2.5 goals might be the special of the World Cup on this game.
Yeah, can we get James's thoughts from Ned's or on that one?
Do it
Anyway.
responsibly, whatever you do.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, think what you can do with your money other than that. I think that's the plug, right? Anyway,
Something like that.
So, yep.
um, whilst we're still talking World Cup, what do you the general thoughts been so far in this tournament, Adam? Have anything sort of stuck out to you other than these god awful hydration breaks? Any teams you want to big up or any general thoughts?
Look, for all the discourse and all the chatter and everything like that, and the predictions of doom, this has been a very good World Cup. Which, in a way, there's a part of me that says, "Oh, I wish it wasn't," because it means that 48 teams was a good idea. But then again, you see scenes like this morning with Curacao, the Cabo Verde draw against the might of Spain, and the emotion that you see on even our good mates Qatar and their last minute ditch Switzerland draw. And you see the emotion. Look, this is what the World Cup is all about. We have the saying with the Australia Cup about the magic of the cup, or the magic of the World Cup is that it's a tournament that you see emotion from all parts, so from the players to the coaches to the fans and all that. And you see this in America, and it's a shame in a way that there's this backdrop of it being in Trump's America, less said the better about that part of things. But I think on the pitch, I think it's been a fantastic tournament. And look, to be honest, I thought the hydration breaks actually would have a marked effect, but I think after what are we now? I think 20 something games in. I'm not really seeing much change on that. So look, all is well. May this tournament long continue and have some great moments.
They are junk, Alex, the hydration breaks. They are having an impact, though. If you look at the way teams are coming out of them, the momentum shift is quite strong in a number of games, including the Australia game. We've been able to maximise those to our effect. I think the way teams are handling them, the teams that are doing it the best are actually the ones who are benefiting from them at the moment. I do agree with Adam. The tournament itself has been really fun. The everyone now, including Curacao, has had their moment in this tournament. All the newcomers have actually held their own for the most part. I know it was a bit very fortunate that Curacao got the draw today against Ecuador. Very fortunate Cabo Verde against Spain, but were able to get a result which those countries will talk about for decades to come, long after we've all forgotten anything about this World Cup. So I think they have been quite good. It's a very wide open tournament as well. I'm not sure anyone's necessarily really flagged themselves as a clear cut favourite to this point. There's a few traditional teams who are not who are traditionally in the contender range who aren't necessarily playing at their absolute best. There's a few teams who are in that secondary bracket, like a Japan, a Colombia, or a Mexico, who are going quite well at the moment. So it's very open as well. It could very much be anybody's tournament.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Scott. And the other surprise upset that I just want to throw in there is the Congolese against Portugal. Wow, 1-1. That's a big one. That was really good. Great to see for the Democratic Republic of Congo, or Dr. Congo as it's been called on Cup Fever, um, by Ed Cavalier and Santo Chilaro. But yeah, look, it is wide open. I guess the one team that looks a little bit scary, but we all know that there's an implosion probably not far around the corner is France. That 3-1 winner over Senegal was pretty impressive. Mbappe looks like he's got some pent-up anger to take out after a difficult season for Real Madrid, where he scored, 40 goals in 40 games or something like that. Difficult season for him, whatever. So, that's a scary thought. But, Spain's draw, Portugal's draw against teams that they were expected to beat. Wow, I mean, does that rein them in, or does that propel them on? I don't know. It's open. Germany, I don't have high expectations for them, and nothing that I've seen suggests otherwise. I thought Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast
Yeah.
could have beaten them, and probably
Should have
should
been.
have
They
if
look
if they
traditional
had a bit more
German, don't
quality.
they? In terms of the way they're playing, they've got you can tell they've got quality, but they're not necessarily that absolute high end of opponent.
Yeah, there's
Dennis
something
Lundau looks
missing.
looks a player. He looks a real good player.
Yeah, he does, but, I've heard whispers that him and Julian Nagelsmann don't get on. So, I mean, your best striker, I mean, obviously Kai Havertz is a great player, but you're playing him as a false nine or whatever. But if you've got a finisher like that in your team and you've got the creative outlets that Germany have, surely you start him. But again, that just goes back into our debate about the Socceroos and their best 11. So, I guess,
Just before you wrap up, Alex,
yeah.
speaking about the debate around the national team, I'm looking forward to this week being actually about the football again, because the last week's been about one particular
Yeah.
pundit and his arrogant,
Mhm.
condescending remarks around the Australian team. And I'm very much looking forward to the discourse in this country getting back to being about us as opposed to what one particular American thinks. I think that'll be
Can I
quite a
just
nice shift.
I just want to add to that point, and not that I want to regurgitate any of what he said, because look, give the man his credit in a way that, in his arrogant, brash way, he did call it to happen. That's great. But I just hope now that with his new ill-gotten fame, that he actually then starts also speaking a bit positively for the game. Yeah, look, if he's going to be parochial about the US as well, having them win the group, they've got a very, very nice run that could take them all the way to at least the last 8. I just hope that he uses this new platform to actually speak good, because at the end of the day, the whole legacy for the United States is to get more people at the in that sport, in that country, to play the game, because we know it's not the primary game. So the fact that he used Australia to basically become, this mega sort of pundit, and he got it right, credit to him. I just hope now that he uses that to spread a bit of positivity, even if it's that American parochial way, to then, start rallying against some traditional sports, like the professional sports, like the NFL and all that, to ensure that football has a place, or soccer has a place in the US beyond the World Cup, and that the US national team does go on to be, a top 10 nation and whatnot, rather than him just, trying to get some cheap clicks and being a clickbait artist, and then disappearing for the next 4 years.
I'm not sure if
That's
positivity is in his repertoire, given what we've seen of him in the last 7 months. But
Mm.
I'm just glad, from our perspective, Alex, we no longer have to hear about it, because the game is in the past. And I have to say, the circus of the last week has actually made me more and more think leading into the game. I can't wait for the game to be over. And now that it is over, we can forget about him and not worry about him anymore.
That's so true, and well said, Adam. I really agree with what you said there. I think you absolutely nailed it, because ultimately USA face a similar position to us here in Australia
Yep.
with their football, or soccer as they call it, or some people here do as well. And to your point, Scott, yeah, done and dusted. I don't want to see that bloke ever again. Please just stay over there in your
Yeah.
country and
Go
enjoy.
annoy someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Go and trash talk someone else, and we're fine. The circus is over. We can
Thoughts
talk
for New
about
Zealand
football.
if they happen to play them in the knockout
Oh dear
rounds. My
lord,
condolences in
yeah,
advance to New Zealand.
yeah.
They're in the path, so
Oh god. Okay, yeah. Good luck. Yeah. Look, football is back on the agenda. We've got a South American team that we play. We know that we've got a poor record against South American teams, but it's a World Cup. Anything can happen, and both teams really don't need to push for a result. It's just who wants to finish second and how highly they value that. And I think that's where we will leave it for this week. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Before we go, though, I will get you to do another plug for the Brisbane Football Review, please, Adam.
you can find us on Facebook, The Raw Review, or Brisbane Football Review, on Twix at BNE Football, Threads and Instagram, Brisbane Football Review. Drop us an email, Brisbane Football Review at gmail.com, and find this show and many other of ours on podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much, Scott, for your time this afternoon as we record this and the dust has settled. We move on to Paraguay, and hopefully we bring you some positive news in the next episode, which we will bring out after that last group game against Paraguay. Hopefully we progress to the knockout stages. Thank you very much for listening to the Aussie Football Passport, joined here by Adam and Scott. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week. Goodbye for now.